the conflation of the two texts we read just a moment ago from the 60th chapter of Isaiah and the 2nd chapter of Matthew give us a pretty good idea that the Magi, the wise men, seem to be following the story from Isaiah. And yet there is embedded in the reading from second chapter of Matthew another prophecy from another prophet, and that is from the prophet Micah, who speaks about Bethlehem of Judea, which is to be considered not the least of the sons of Judah. And so we've got something like dueling prophets here. Who do you listen to? And with that in mind, let us stand together and we'll read once again the second chapter. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born, King of the Jews? For we have observed his star, that it's rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all of Jerusalem with him. And calling together his chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. And they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least of the rulers of Judah, for you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. Then they saw that the star had stopped, and they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Please be seated. Well, those strange Eastern exotics, those people we call the wise men, set out from their homes, how many times do you expect that they must have had to answer the question, do you know where you're going? Do you know where you're going? Have you consulted the maps? Have you looked for the appropriate guiding stars? Have you prayed the right prayers to the Zoroastrian god Ahura Mazda? Have you considered the weather? You'll have to pay an extra price to the camel drivers this time of year. Say it again. Where do you think you're going? There's no firewood in the desert. That cold, dry, desolate land over which the wise men were compelled to make their trip. Maybe there is some rough brush here and there that could be set on fire. Maybe the wise men had to bring their own wood with them. Maybe they burned the camel's dung. And maybe, just maybe, there were too many cold, shivering nights when the night fires just went out and the men longed for the safety and security of the fine life that they left behind. Well, all this makes me say that this was a little bit like a baptism, the wise men's long trip, like a coming to faith, a conversion, if you will, a great fork in the road of their life, a great change of life, a new chapter for them. Think about it. They came from sensuous pagan lands in order to kneel in humility in Bethlehem. Think the stories of the Arabian Nights of Scheherazade, eclipsed now by the Virgin Mother and her newborn baby. Think of the foul mouth camel drivers suddenly being caught in a silent reverie as they kneel before Jesus the King, the Lord of all. Think of those wise and wealthy seekers who offer their best to the Christ child. These men who had seen so much, men who had touched raw silk and tasted sherbet, they were now in sight of a real miracle. And it was no less a miracle than this. It was Almighty God's one final, perfect answer to the desperation of human sin. Christ the Lord, the divine offer of hope and life and light. It was like a baptism, like a conversion to the faith that these wise men came along such a long way from their pagan lands to Bethlehem. But did they really know where they were going? Do any of us? We don't typically ask that question here when somebody joins the church, or when we baptize someone, or when we sense that a person's own spiritual journey is deepening. But maybe we should ask the question. It could be useful. Do you know where you're going? For most of us, our decision to follow God is a little bit less dramatic than the wise men's trek over hundreds of miles. And yet it is still a journey. And on the way, we do have moments that leave us breathless with wonder. And we pass through patches in our lives in which the way forward is perhaps terribly unclear to us. We might say that our destination's journey is heaven. But then don't we think that heaven will be very much like coming home again, finally? And if that's true, then maybe the journey of faith is really about right now, about the faithful struggles that we engage in each day, about seeking God's direction for our life right now, about clinging to hope, about having our meager hopes expanded and exceeded when in fact daily we see some small, precious glimpse of how good and loving our God really is.